Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first virtual In Conversation event. My name is Sue Hunt. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Royal Children's Hospital Foundation, and I'm really thrilled that you could all join us today. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather? For us, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, but for wherever you are, I'm sure we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Can I also welcome Professor Julie Bynes? We're so grateful, Julie, that you could join us today. Thank you so much. So like many of you, we're finding new ways of doing things, aren't we? And today is just one of those new ways of doing things. So we wanted to gather still with the 1870s Society friends and members, but we wanted to do that virtually. We'd love you to do some questions today. Julie's going to do a presentation. We'd love you to ask some questions. And so how you do that is you can type them into the chat function. So we've put a little slide up there for you to be able to see. So please type them in using the chat function at any time, and we will answer them during the Q&A section later on. So if you wanted to have a little practice, I'm happy to wait for a couple of seconds while you find that chat function. For most people, it will be on the bottom of the screen. So, this year marks the 150 years of the hospital providing outstanding care to Victoria's children. It's safe to say that when we began 2020 and this milestone year, we didn't quite envisage that it was going to end up like this. But that's okay, because as a community, we're all fighting COVID-19 together and we're all fighting this pandemic. I'm so proud to say that the RCH, with the help of supporters like you, has been able to meet this challenge head on, in the same way that it's met this challenge for the last 150 years. And you're looking there at a lovely shot of our 1870 Society members, and many of you are online today, but it's just such a fantastic group of people that we just wanted to show you yourselves up on the screen. So the hospital's been able to react really quickly, and it's been innovating and adapting the way that it deals with the pandemic as it cares for sick children in general. And as we're going to learn today, this care can extend beyond the four walls of the hospital. In fact, beyond our state and globally. And Professor Bynes is going to share some of that work with us this morning. So Julie's one of Australia's most renowned paediatric gastroenterologists, and she has many roles on campus. She was the inaugural Victor and Loti Smorgon Professor of Paediatrics with the University of Melbourne. She's a paediatric gastroenterologist, as I say, at the Royal Children's Hospital, and she's a member of the Melbourne Children's Global Health Leadership Team. She's also the leading researcher on the rotavirus program at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, which is on site here at the Royal Children's Hospital. And it's this role, and as a leader of the global effort to reduce childhood gastroenteritis, that we're fortunate to be hearing about today. Now, really interestingly, this is a story that goes back decades, and many of you online will know that. It started more than 40 years ago with Dr. Ruth Bishop and her team, who discovered the rotavirus in the 1970s. And that changed the lives of children, not just here at home, but all around the world. And their work paved the way for the discovery of a live oral vaccine that significantly reduced the severity of the disease and now saves hundreds of thousands of young lives around the world. And what Professor Bynes has been able to do is take that program even further with the development of the RV3BB vaccine, which is currently undertaking clinical trials to administer this to babies soon after work. Soon after work? Soon after birth.
Oh, I hope not.
Babies working.
Mother's work.
Yeah, soon after birth. And I'll actually never forget, Julie, the first time you and I ever sat down to talk about rotavirus, and, you know, as a non-medical person, I knew nothing about it. But, you know, I always remember, you know, nearly 10 years later, that incredible thing when I realised the difference between giving it at 6 weeks, as it had been, and then giving it at birth. So this is a major development, and it can only be administered, as I said, to babies who are 6 weeks old. So these clinical trials are really essential. So just to learn a little bit more about that, we're going to show you a video and to give you a bit greater understanding.
The
The aim of our research is to identify a way to prevent rotavirus gastroenteritis from birth in children in Australia and around the world. It kills about 215,000 children each year, under 5. That's about 600 babies per day, many of those in the developing countries of the world, the poorest of the poor. So rotavirus was discovered back in the 1970s in children presenting to the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne. Funding for this research from the very early days has been very critical, and the NHMRC has provided much of that really critical funding through the course of this project. We've just published a major trial in Indonesia which showed that the vaccine was very effective in where it's needed most. This is a real game changer. We're about to study this vaccine's impact in Africa, in Malawi. I feel tremendous satisfaction that we've been able to develop this legacy from discovery now through to prevention with the help of and support of the NHMRC. I think it's a terrific contribution from Australia to global child health.
So truly incredible work with an amazing global impact. The NHMRC that's mentioned in the video is the National Health and Medical Research Council. And many of the major efforts that we as a foundation support with philanthropic funds also gets that sort of public funding as well. So now I am delighted to welcome Julie, who is a great collaborator and a great friend of ours at the foundation. Can I pass over to you, Julie, for your presentation?
Thank you very much, Sue, and thank you very much for this opportunity to talk with you today about some of the work that has been ongoing here for the past 4 decades and some exciting new developments I'd like to share with you now. This work is really around taking advantage of the scientific and the clinical work that is done here at the Royal Children's Hospital on the Melbourne Children's Campus to impact on children worldwide. Rotavirus is the leading cause of gastroenteritis worldwide, and before the introduction of vaccines, all children, no matter where you were in the world, in Africa or Australia, would develop an episode of rotavirus gastroenteritis before the age of 5. But the major difference, whether you develop this in Australia or in Africa or India or other places of the world, was whether you could have appropriate medical attention to be able to treat effectively for the dehydration that occurs with this type of gastroenteritis. We know now that the particular virus causing this infection impacts on the small bowel. Your first episode of gastroenteritis or infection is worse, and so that's why very small babies are very vulnerable. What you might not be aware of is the discovery of this important virus occurred here at the Melbourne Children's Campus with children admitted for gastroenteritis to the Royal Children's Hospital. At that time, we had a gastroenteritis ward. Such were the cases of gastro, particularly in gastro season. And it was a collaboration that included scientists such as Ruth Bishop here at the Royal Children's Hospital, clinicians, gastroenterologists in the Department of Gastroenterology at the Royal Children's Hospital, working with scientists at the University of Melbourne that made that pivotal discovery back in the 1970s, which identified rotavirus here in Melbourne, first in the world and then throughout the world as the cause for the major severe dehydrating illness that was killing about 1 million children each year. Following on from that research, the group have worked continuously on rotavirus understanding and in working ways to treat and prevent rotavirus. And back in 2000s, WHO made a recommendation that all children worldwide should receive a rotavirus vaccine. And now 98 countries of the world have a rotavirus vaccine into their normal national immunisation schedule. In Melbourne and Australia, all babies are delivered a rotavirus vaccine at either 2, 3 or 4 months of age, 3 doses, usually orally provided. This vaccine, or these vaccines, are incredibly effective and have been shown to reduce deaths from about 1 million down to about 260,000 children per year currently. But there's still work to be done. Although we have these vaccines available, still about 81 million children worldwide don't receive an effective rotavirus vaccine, and that's in particular in children in the most vulnerable countries of the world, where most of the deaths still occur, still over 260,000 deaths each year. So still a lot of work still to be done. Our group has asked the question, is it possible to protect newborn babies from birth from severe gastroenteritis? And why newborns? They're particularly vulnerable. The current vaccines are only able to be given at 6 or 8 weeks of age, and there's an important gap there where babies are vulnerable, and it's possible that this could improve protection if we could deliver an early vaccine. We've been working since the 1990s on a very unusual strain of rotavirus vaccine, actually discovered here in Melbourne, following on from the work of Ruth Bishop and Graham Barnes. And this is a very novel strain identified in newborn babies in Melbourne, and that was identified quite by accident. The group were asked to investigate an outbreak of gastroenteritis in the newborn nurseries around Melbourne, and they found an unusual kind of rotavirus present in these babies, but for some reason this was not in the babies that had gastroenteritis. These were healthy babies that had this rotavirus infection. And when they followed these babies up for the first 3 years of life, these babies were protected from subsequent severe rotavirus gastroenteritis compared to other babies in those same newborn nurseries. So an ideal rotavirus vaccine candidate. And we've developed this subsequently with the aim to deliver it from birth, because we know it's particularly safe in babies from birth, and the aim to improve the coverage and also the protection for newborn babies worldwide. These trials of this particular vaccine developed here in Melbourne have undergone studies in Melbourne, in New Zealand, in Indonesia, and now in Africa, in Malawi. Our study in Indonesia, which was quite a large study, in Indonesia around 10,000 babies die each year from rotavirus gastroenteritis, so this could be prevented by a vaccine. We found that the vaccine, when delivered as an oral vaccine, just 1 ml to a baby from birth, 3 doses, it provided very good protection in the first 12 months of age. 94% of babies were protected from severe gastroenteritis in Indonesia, and this is a country with a lot of rotavirus disease and high child mortality. And the results of this study were superior actually to current vaccines on the market. And so this vaccine may have potential of improving the protection offered by a rotavirus vaccine, particularly in countries where disease is common. We've followed up this study in a study which only finished this year in January in Malawi in Africa. This country was really an aim to try the vaccine in a very challenging environment where child mortality is very high, and the opportunity for this vaccine to have a real impact from birth in babies, where a lot of babies have suffered from gastroenteritis as well as many other illnesses. This has been an incredibly challenging and rewarding study and involved seeking out children within the community in lots of very challenging ways. We struggled through a huge cyclone and floods in Malawi. We've been able to tolerate presidential elections with lots of chaos and lots of various other challenges. I won't mention the current COVID pandemic, but it has been a challenging study, and a study full of a lot of satisfaction. The potential for a birth dose of vaccine really has the opportunity to provide early protection. It appears that an early dose of vaccine lasts longer in protection than a vaccine delivered later. And we have an opportunity to reach more babies at birth when mums and babies are more often in contact with a healthcare provider. So complete immunisation could be more possible. And it appears to be safer and may improve protection in Africa and Asia because of an intrinsic characteristic of the particular vaccine. We're also partnering with a number of emerging country vaccine manufacturers so we can produce this vaccine at a very affordable cost, so that it can be implemented and cost is not a barrier for introduction in low resource settings. So We're hoping actually in the next 2 weeks to be seeing the first lot of our results of our tests from Malawi and to publish that soon after. I have no results to share with you at the moment, only to say we know the vaccine has been very safe when delivered in Africa, and we're very optimistic it will show good response. But watch this space, Sue. We'll have some, hopefully later on this year we'll have some data to share. But I think what this project from its 4 decades show that work done here at the Children's Hospital here in Melbourne can have a huge impact globally, and I'm very grateful for the support from the foundation, for me personally, for the Smorgon family who have provided me an opportunity to focus on this work as the Smorgon chair, and I'm very grateful to you all for your contribution to the foundation that makes this work happen. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you so much. What an incredibly interesting presentation. I'm sure if you haven't heard Julie speak on rotavirus research and the vaccine before, I'm sure you've learned an enormous amount there, as I did the first time that I heard Julie speak about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have lots of time for questions. So I'm going to let you type those into the chat functions. I'm sure you have got lots of them. But just while people are collecting their thoughts and thinking about that, I will ask a few myself.
Of course,
the opportunity to do that. So the first one, you were talking about clinical trials taking place worldwide. I'm sure everyone would appreciate it. It's one thing to do it here at home, but can you talk to us about the specific challenges that you face when undertaking clinical trials in developing countries? And I guess if you wanted to reflect on, you talked about elections, but if you wanted to reflect on the current challenges, around the pandemic on as well, that'd be terrific.
Sure. Look, I think I've learnt a lot by going into various countries to do clinical trials, and I think the important thing that I've learnt is that it is wonderful to have a common goal. You can only be successful if you have a common goal with the people that are in country. And let's say for Indonesia, work in the clinical trial there, that's only been possible because for many years we've shared a common goal to develop a vaccine with the Indonesian scientists and academics and government for Indonesian children. And so they were very committed to this, really met and partnered very well with their objectives within their country. So they were very committed to do this study and to do it very well. And hopefully through this partnership we will have a vaccine, the RV3BB vaccine, introduced in Indonesia in the next couple of years. Yeah. So understanding that. Also there's cultural challenges, different cultural challenges in Indonesia as there were in Malawi, and understanding some of the barriers. What are one of the things in Malawi, there are important ethics around entering people in clinical trials and how you thank them, for their babies undergo 3 or 4 blood tests. That's very traumatic for any mum to have their baby bled and to need to collect poo samples and so forth. And we can't pay. That's not ethically appropriate. And what is something that they would appreciate? And in Malawi, the thing that was most appreciated was a block of soap. And so we actually gave a block of soap at the end of the study. Also, they didn't know they were getting this, but we gave them a mosquito net for the bed, this mosquito bed net. And that was all approved by the ethics committee, but it was all, what are the things that are going to be appreciated and meaningful for families in those regions, and also too, how do we embrace and train local people so that the next trial they can do themselves, and how you can develop the local capacity for their own clinical trials and so forth. So that's a really important thing, a legacy to leave when we leave.
Yeah, to leave something behind as well in terms of skill. I've just seen a one question that's come through which actually kind of relates or extends on that question, Julie, so I'll ask that one now. The local partnerships that make this new vaccine affordable, is that model going to be able to help other vaccines globally?
I hope so. I mean, I think this project has been also funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who have been important contributors to the ability of vaccines to be delivered to children in the poorest of the poor countries. And part of the commitment that we make when we sign on to any of those grants is that we need to make it affordable within those, and that's a commitment that we have. And a commitment they have for funding. So partnerships are incredibly important to be able to make that dream happen, that we're not just producing a vaccine that can never be delivered because it's too expensive or too difficult to make, or by an emerging country manufacturer. So that's all part of the thinking in the development of a program like this.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So another thing that's really interesting, beyond the work that you're doing in rotavirus is the many roles that you've got across campus. So you've got an appointment with the University of Melbourne, you're in clinical work with the hospital, and there's the work with the Murdoch Children's Research Institute specifically around rotavirus. Can you talk a little bit about why that partnership model? And I suppose just for people to understand, while we're all individual organisations on campus, we're working in a really strong partnership model. So I think this is a great opportunity for you to share with us why why it's so powerful that this partnership model, where research, education and clinical come together, all underpinned by philanthropy, of course. Why is that so powerful, and what do you think it's delivering for us here as a campus? And of course, what's it delivering for sick children?
Yeah, well, I feel very grateful to be have spent many years, about 3 decades, here on this campus. With this incredible combination and partnership that you talk of. And I think it's really illustrated very much by the early discovery of rotavirus, because the way that was discovered was that in the hospital here we had a gastroenterolitis ward. At the time, the majority of children presenting to that ward, we had no idea what the causative organism was. 80% of children, we had no idea what the cause was. Therefore, how do you prevent it? And it's from that early question is, what is the cause of bringing children to the gastroenterolitis ward at the Royal Children's Hospital? What is the cause? And so from that, the science came in as, how can we use our science to try and understand that cause? And so it was the clinicians in the Department of Gastroenterology who took the initial biopsies that were looked at under the special microscope at the University of Melbourne. So getting the partner at the University of Melbourne to look using the new state-of-the-art equipment at the biopsies of these children that the rotavirus was first seen. And they actually saw it in the first view of the first biopsy of the first child within that study, trying to look at the cause of diarrhoea. So it involved the clinicians asking the clinical question, obtaining the material they needed to do by doing, getting a biopsy of children, and a collaboration with scientists who knew how to process that material and look at it in an appropriate way. And so that amazing partnership. And then how do you actually build on that and build on it to develop a group which asks around the science, but always driven by the clinical question and using the experience and expertise around what richness of expertise we have here at university and now the Murdoch Children's Research Institute. So it's a great example of why these partnerships are really so important in impactful research that's not only going to impact on our children, but the children in other areas of the world as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I see we have a question from Barry Novi, so I'm going to ask that next because it's back to the vaccine.
Hi, Barry.
Yes, hi, Barry. So Barry, most people online will probably know Barry is a former chair of the RCH Foundation. He's a former board member of the hospital, and he's currently chair of RCH 1000, which is a group of donors who are dedicated to research. So we know Barry has many great connections with us. His question is, what is the downside of giving a vaccine at birth? As it appears, there are none. Why are the samplings as extensive as it appears before concluding?
Sure. There aren't too many disadvantages in giving this particular vaccine at birth, because we know in nature babies at birth are very healthy, and this vaccine we've got 4 decades of experience that this particular strain of rotavirus has no ill effects. So we feel very confident there is no downsides. There are other vaccines given at birth routinely. Here in Australia, we give hepatitis B vaccine at birth. In countries around the world, BCG, oral polio vaccine, hepatitis B are all given at birth. And birth is considered to be the best immunisation opportunity, is when mums and babies are in the presence of healthcare. So it's an opportunity to deliver vaccines, but it's also an opportunity to provide early protection and to stimulate the immune system. So it's a great opportunity. In terms of the second part was, why does it take so long? Look, I'm so jealous of people developing, in some ways, a COVID vaccine currently, because there is a lot of work and effort to accelerate those vaccines. But in reality, it's one thing to show a vaccine works, but also we need to show that it is safe. And of all the things we do to make sure that the medicines and the treatments we have are safe, when we don't get over-enthusiastic to bring a treatment or a vaccine to many millions of children without having done our homework to know it's safe. And that requires testing these vaccines in a lot of children and in a lot of different scenarios where there might be different environmental conditions and situations to make sure the vaccine's safe before it's given that stamp of approval and to be able to be rolled out into an immunisation program.
Great, thank you. And another one from Stuart Tolliday. Welcome, Stuart. Lovely to see you. Stuart asks, why was Malawi selected for this trial?
It's one of those things with clinical trials and research. If you have established collaborations and you feel confident that the work can be done well at a high quality, that really affects where you might choose it. All good outcomes come from good collegiality and knowing work can be done well. In Malawi, it's one of the poorest countries of the world. We know that the child mortality rate is very high, so there was a need. The second thing is we knew that the people in Malawi were very keen to test our vaccine in Malawi, so we had enthusiasm. Malawi also has a Wellcome Trust laboratory, so we could analyse our samples in Malawi safely, and we knew that they would be high quality results, as well as also transporting samples here to be done here at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute. So it's a combination of making sure you can do the study well. It's a meaningful study in that, and good collaboration so that you can have confidence in the results.
Great. And there's another one just popped up here, and I think it takes us back to that previous question about the partnership model that we have on campus. So Ryan's asking, how important was philanthropy to develop the vaccine, in developing the vaccine? Incredibly
important, essential, because people have, there are a lot of good ideas, but how do you move that next step from an idea to actually having a reality? And sometimes that's small, important pieces of information. Doing a small intrinsic study that shows a proof of principle that you can move to the next step. And those initial funding opportunities provided by the foundation were critical in that. I think also true, the personal funding from myself, from the Smorgon family for the Smorgon chair, enabled me to concentrate on some of that work and to be able to put my efforts and time into thinking about this, leveraging off this to put in grants for the Gates Foundation and so forth, and to move to that next step. So incredibly essential, and I'm so grateful for all the support and encouragement that the foundation has provided, even in encouragement as well as the opportunity to speak to you all and show that you're interested in this work is incredibly valuable.
Thanks, Julie. Well, as a foundation, we're incredibly grateful to donors who want to be a part of this sort of work. And I think it's always really interesting to be able to say to donors whatever they're giving to, whether they're giving, in this case, to your work or to other work, just how impactful that can be. And I think what we're hearing there is the kind of notion of the impact that it can have in research, in clinical practice, in academic practice in general, and just, it can be right across the board. It can see us
Absolutely.
impacting children here at home, which, it has right from the beginning, but also now, helping to impact, globally. So it's really important. And for us, we're just, in a way, I always think we're just the stewards of people like Loti and Victor Smorgon and the Smorgon family, like people who are tuning in today. We're just the stewards of that work and your desire to be impactful. So thank you for reflecting on that. I wanted to ask you a little bit about leadership. So we've talked about partnership on campus. I wanted to ask a little bit about leadership. You're highly respected part of our community on campus. You're a member of the Melbourne Children's Global Health Leadership Team. We've heard about your other appointments at in terms of the Loti and Victor Smorgon Chair in Paediatrics was really important. Just talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on leadership in general, on personal leadership and how that plays out through the various roles that you've undertaken.
Look, I think leadership is such an intrinsic contribution we can make, and sometimes we can anticipate the impact of good role models and stepping up to the plate and providing leadership. I think there are a number of different opportunities I've had where I've looked at various senior leaders and said, that is a really important way to encourage, inspire young people to help people that want to make a contribution and don't know how that it fits into their own personal space. And I think also too, on this campus we have a huge opportunity for leadership and advocacy for our children and adolescents in Victoria and Australia and worldwide. So I think leadership is a huge contribution we make in all elements of clinical, academic, scientific and education. And I think the concept of this campus provides a huge opportunity for this campus, such a well-respected campus in Australia and worldwide, to really lead from the front, and we're very fortunate to have many leaders here on our campus. In terms of leadership, I just would like also to make a comment about women in leadership.
Yeah, please.
Because I think that one of the things that we still haven't got right is the role of women in leadership, not only in healthcare but in a variety of other aspects of life. And one thing that struck me when I was working with the women's the global health was so many young women were very keen to make a contribution in global health, but really struggled to work out how they might do that. And on campus here, and this is just an example, we developed a group, Women's in Global Health, on the Melbourne Children's campus, which was a really, this started a couple of years ago, where we brought together people from clinical science, academic, on campus, and whether they were clinical scientists, admin people, a variety of people that were just interested in coming together in a safe place to talk about some of the challenges they had as women, and from also a range of ages, from students, PhD students, medical students, junior researchers, to the older people like myself that have been through that. Some people were very keen on understanding, how do you get into global health? If you have a young person and you would like a family, how does that work? Can it work? Or how can you make a contribution as a woman? And I think, and subsequent to that, we've actually this year embarked on the Women have become a chapter in Australasia and led from this campus in the Women's and Global Health entity, which is a global a fairly new global health consortium or partnership around the world. And the idea is that, it suddenly struck me that this was something that was sort of calling for. There's about 75% of all healthcare workers around the world are women, but only about 25% of the leaders in global health work are women. And so, and a lot of the women that work in healthcare globally are unpaid, underpaid, and not recognised. So the question was, how do we help advocate for women, whether it's here in Australia who want to engage in global health and become leaders, women in our region, other regions, to be able to articulate what are some of the challenges for women and children in the global health space. And that's an area where we're really hoping to grow. And as I say, it's the idea came from here, and we're involved in leading that, and it's gathered a lot of momentum, and I'm really looking forward to being able to make a contribution in that way.
Great, thank you. It's interesting, you've talked there's two things resonated with me there when you talked about bringing people together here on the campus, bringing women together here on the campus, and that creating the safe place, having a discussion, and obviously, learning from the elders as well as, learning from each other. And then you talked about advocacy on a broader space. What is it that, about those two pieces, working locally but giving people the opportunity to talk, and then pushing out, to a broader scale where you're not directly, but you're advocating. How do you think that's going to help women in STEM, leadership in women in STEM? Why are those two things kind of important, particularly for us right now?
I think right now, I think it's incredibly important because there've been a couple of very insightful publications just coming out that of the publications on this new COVID, every day there are hundreds of new publications coming out around this current pandemic in the scientific literature, and I can't remember the exact percent, but almost predominantly from not from women. And that sort of highlights the in times of crisis, and I'm not fabulous, we should be all contributing to a global pandemic, a global effort into global health. But it has highlighted that a lot of women's careers have suffered during this last 6 months because of the nature of caregiving and unable to concentrate and go back to science. And that's reflected in the publications that are coming out now. And this was published in the BMJ, it's been published elsewhere, that the careers of women in this pandemic will suffer because they've been unable to keep up with all the other activities. And I think it's just to highlight that is an issue at the moment, and that we should be aware of that in promotions and in opportunities for women, that there may be some opportunity lost for women during this period of time, and to highlight that.
Yeah, great. And I'm going to ask you one more question about leadership, and then we'll move on. What if there was one thing that you and I could do to help those people in our respective areas coming up, women coming up from fellow? What do you think? What's the one thing that we can do as people who've had more of our career behind us than ahead, shall we say? What's the one thing we should be doing with young people, young women wanting to come up? Particularly in science, but in general.
I actually think it's actually being the best person we can and making the best contribution we can, so that we're a good role model and that people can, not everything that we as individuals would suit everybody, and nor would you want them to suit everybody, but then to be able to show that there is kindness and grace, honesty and collegiality and the idea of partnership, but also through rigour to principles. And if we can show all of those qualities, no matter where we are and what we do, then I think that does give heart for people to come a younger or our colleagues as to look up to and try and model those behaviours.
Yeah. Sometimes you've just got to give people permission to take that step forward, don't you?
Well, it's giving permission and being open and generous with your time in terms of mentoring and so forth. But also, as I say, to be the best person we can within all the struggles and difficulties, so that people can see there's another way.
Yeah, thank you. That's terrific. Now, related to that, but slightly away from leadership, but more back into your the role that you had with the Loti and Victor Smorgon Chair of Paediatric, Professor of Paediatrics. And can I take the opportunity to acknowledge Loti and Victor's family and the Smorgon family in general for incredible support. Julie's talked about it before, but incredible multi-generational contribution through the hospital and to research and to paediatrics in general. I just wanted to ask that one question about the chair in paediatrics was the deputy head of the Department of Paediatrics here on campus, so it was significant in education and training the next leaders. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how that sense of that training brings people forward in their careers?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the assumption has been in the past that you see one, do one, teach one. I think in terms of a lot of our elements of life, but I think we all, no matter where we are in our life course, would benefit from training and learning more. And I would like to see our campus moving to the concept of lifelong learning, where we're actually recognising that it's not just the juniors that have to learn, but the seniors that have to learn as well.
Yep.
And we are on this journey of enhancing our knowledge, our experience, and the ways we can impact throughout our careers and our lives, really. And we should be, as a campus, have the opportunities available for people at various stages of their career to learn not only facts and figures, but also learn processes and ways we relate to people, new ways that we can learn ourselves, but also help others along that journey. Yeah. And I think that's a broader concept than we have traditionally thought about.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And we've just got a couple of other questions that are coming through. This is really interesting, related to the kind of question about female leadership that we've been talking about. From Stuart Tolliday again, does being a female leader inhibit your work in any way in third world countries?
It's a good question. It's a good question. I've actually never seen being a female leader actually inhibiting me at all, because I actually don't necessarily. And so from that point of view, but yes, part of the reason why I was really keen to get this Women in Global Health group up and running was because you see that women in certain societies and certain cultures have a much harder road. And how do we help women along that journey, particularly when the culture it doesn't necessarily reward female leaders or encourage female leadership. And I've actually learnt a lot from looking at different cultures and how, and one of my greatest mentors has been someone by the name of Professor Yati Sunato from Indonesia, University of Yogyakarta. She may be known to some of you from her various visits here, and she is known as the grandmother of paediatrics in Indonesia. And in her 70s now, she's still incredibly active. I was talking to her just this week, and she has mentored so many women into leadership positions in Indonesia, where you would think that there is a sometimes women aren't considered as having a same voice as men, but what I've learnt within these countries around the world, despite some of these challenges, incredibly effective women who are able to use some characteristics of their female leadership to be incredibly effective. And probably we do have a really good example of Dame Elizabeth in her ability to encourage the sight of this hospital being built here. That there are ways female leadership can take advantage of some of the opportunities that are part of our characteristics that can be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it was a group of women who stood side by side with the doctors who had the innovation to have a hospital, to bring sick and dying children together to have a hospital. It was the women who made it happen, and it was the women who ran it for decades, of course. And then, as you say, that modern founder, in a way, of Dame Elizabeth, in terms of getting this hospital the first hospital on this site, and then the tradition of coming forward, you know, into this next one. We're you know, incredibly lucky that we have had strong women, you know, throughout our time in this state, aren't we? Really?
Yeah, and it's about, you know, hearing the voices of women as well as the voices of men, and that's what it's an equality sort of. Recognising the advantages of
great. And I think that's kind of a great moment to kind of move on. Thank you, everybody, for the questions. We've run out of time for the questions. Julie, thank you so much. You know, it's really interesting. We wish you were all here in the room with us, but I feel like we've had an incredible conversation, and I feel like you've been part of that. So thank you so much. If you do have any more questions, please let Jessica or myself know, and we'll get them through to Julie, or we'll answer them ourselves if we can. The 1870 Society is named in honour of the hospital's founding year, as we all know, and it celebrates those of you who are thinking about or have chosen to leave a lasting gift that extends beyond your lifetime. I've chosen to do that, and I guess the reason why I chose to do it, and we're seeing these wonderful photos up here now, was just the importance of the hospital to its community, and the importance that, you know, while we are only stewards of that here at the moment, it's our responsibility to leave that for the next 150 years. And that was one of the reasons, that was kind of the most profound reason, I think, for me, was, giving now is important, but giving in the future and making sure that, in fact, this hospital will still be there in whatever configuration it needs to be in, will be with us for the next 150 years as well. So the Society and events like this are just one way that we can show you our appreciation and our heartfelt thanks. Thank you so much for joining with us. These events help us to learn a little bit more about our clinicians and our researchers, so we hope they're valuable and meaningful for you. And Julie's story is just one, as I think probably many of you know, that's happening right across campus today, and will continue to happen across campus for many years to come. So just in closing, we wanted to share one short video with you. It doesn't take us right back to 1870, but it does take us back to things that many people who have joined us here today will remember and will resonate. It takes us back to thinking about how we dream big and how we can be certain that we shouldn't let the challenges of today limit the possibilities of tomorrow. So before we say farewell, I sincerely just want to thank you again for your commitment to the Royal Children's Hospital. We're really fortunate, and I do mean this, we're fortunate to have supporters like all of you. It's our honour and our gift to be able to have conversations with you about how your donations can be impactful and meaningful to you in the way you want to change the future of children's health. That's all we're here to do as a foundation. The hospital and people like Julie are here to change the future of children's health itself and to work with those children. For us, it's just to help you be impactful. So thank you so much. I look forward to when we can actually meet again face to face. But in the meantime, everybody stay safe, stay at home where you can, practice physical distancing, and please wash those hands. Thank you so much. And here's this lovely video to take us out.
Thanks.